it kind of hits you when you stop and think about it. We are more connected, technically, than ever before.
Right. Like nonstop.
Yeah, I mean, from old school phone calls now to texting to video chats across the globe in like seconds. But doesn't it feel like sometimes, despite all that digital stuff, we're somehow feeling more alone,
Yeah.
more isolated?
Absolutely. And what's really interesting here is that it's not just a vague feeling. The data actually backs this up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, year after year, we're seeing this steady climb in average anxiety and depression levels globally. It's a trend that, well, it really makes you stop and wonder what's going on underneath it all.
Exactly. So, okay, for this deep dive, we've dug into some pretty compelling information trying to get to the heart of this paradox, I guess. Our mission really is to understand the normal mechanisms maybe driving these feelings and, crucially, look at some potential ways forward.
Yeah, and that immediately brings up a big question. If we're so connected, why this rise? Why these feelings? Our sources seem to suggest we need to look, well, deeper than just the surface. We need to understand the biology.
Okay, so let's think about a common scenario then. Someone starts feeling off, just not right. Those feelings grow, maybe get worse, and eventually maybe they seek professional help, right? A psychiatrist or someone. What's the explanation they usually get?
Well, the typical explanation often kind of zeroes in on a biochemical imbalance. They might be told they have a predisposition, maybe genetic, maybe environmental.
Right.
That leads to lower levels of key neurotransmitters, things like serotonin, dopamine, the ones we hear about a lot for mood.
Okay, and the standard solution that tends to follow that explanation?
Often, yeah, it involves medication, usually something aimed at increasing the levels of those specific neurotransmitters, trying to rebalance the brain chemistry, essentially.
Which, okay, our sources say isn't necessarily wrong, but it's a bit of an oversimplification, isn't it?
Definitely. It's a simplified view.
It makes you ask, like, what's the real reason? What's actually causing these biochemical shifts in the first place?
Exactly. And if we zoom out a bit, look at how the body actually works, as a whole system, we see that producing any substance properly, not just for mood, but hormones like thyroid hormones, anything really, it relies on three fundamental things.
3 pillars, kind of.
Yeah, think of them like that, foundational requirements.
Okay, 3 key ingredients for the body to make what it needs. What are they?
So the first pillar is simply having enough of the necessary raw materials. Let's use serotonin as an example, since it's so linked to depression.
Makes sense.
If you give the body its basic building blocks, well, you can significantly boost its ability to actually produce it.
Okay, so what's the key raw material for serotonin then?
That would be tryptophan. It's an amino acid. And here's something really interesting from the sources. Supplementing with, say, around 1,000 milligrams of tryptophan daily. It's a nutritional approach, generally safe and potentially quite effective. For some people, maybe even comparable to traditional antidepressants.
Wow, okay. Just from the raw material.
Yeah, it's a powerful thought, right? A natural substance with that kind of potential.
Definitely something a lot of people probably don't know about. So, okay, that's pillar 1. Raw materials. What's the second essential element?
The second pillar is all about absorption. How well can your body actually take in those raw materials? And this is where the gut microbiome, your gut bacteria, your flora intestinal plays a massive role.
The gut again. Seems like everything comes back to the gut these days.
It really does. Our sources really emphasize this symbiotic relationship we have with like trillions of bacteria in there.
Right.
A healthy, diverse gut environment is just crucial for absorbing nutrients properly, including the ones you need for neurotransmitters. But unfortunately, our modern diets, well, they often mess up that delicate balance.
And that's where probiotics might come in. I remember reading about that.
Exactly. Research has actually pinpointed specific strains. Bifidobacteria, for example, found in certain probiotics that seem linked to increased serotonin levels.
Wow.
And what's really remarkable, some studies have suggested that the symptom improvements you can get from these probiotics can be pretty comparable to what you see with a common antidepressant like citalopram, Lexapro.
Whoa, wait. Comparable to Lexapro. That's huge.
It is pretty eye-opening, yeah. It just highlights that intense gut-brain connection.
So it's not necessarily about, like, dismissing traditional treatment.
At all.
But more about recognizing and, I guess, supporting the body's own natural ability to function.
Precisely. It's about understanding the picture is probably more complex than just, low serotonin. There's more going on.
Okay. So raw materials, absorption via the gut. What's the third crucial pillar? Hit us with number 3.
The third essential element is basically the lack of major obstructions, things getting in the way of production. And a major inhibitor, a big roadblock here, is high levels of cortisol.
Ah, cortisol, the stress hormone. We hear about that all the time.
Mm.
So basically, being stressed out long term can actually stop our bodies from making these mood chemicals properly.
Exactly that. Now, short bursts of cortisol, they can actually be good in some situations. One of our sources even touches on, like, the Wim Hof method and short-term inflammation benefits.
Right, I saw that.
But chronically high levels, that really interferes. It gums up the works for producing what you need for a balanced mood.
Okay, got it. So the foundation is get the right ingredients, make sure you can absorb them, and try to minimize the big roadblocks like chronic stress. Makes sense. So let's move on to the practical stuff then. What can we actually do? Our sources laid out 6 actionable solutions for depression and anxiety. First up, omega-3s.
Yeah, omega-3 fatty acids. What's key here is they're essential for good brain function. And essential means, well, your body can't make them. You have to get them from your diet or supplements.
Right. And how much should people aim for? Is there a specific amount?
Generally, the recommendation is often somewhere between 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams a day. And you particularly want to look for ones rich in EPA. Research suggests that subtype is especially helpful for mood.
Okay, EPA. Got it. Solution number 2 takes us outside. Sunlight exposure. Seems almost too simple,
Yeah.
But how big a deal is it really?
It's surprisingly significant. Think about it. Our modern lives are mostly indoors, right?
Yeah, totally.
Worlds away from our evolutionary history, spending
Yeah.
most of our time outside. And that lack of sun exposure, well, it has consequences. It can throw off hormonal balance, affect energy levels, mess with our circadian rhythm,
Yeah.
the whole sleep-wake cycle.
And the vitamin D link is key here too, right?
Yeah, absolutely crucial. Sunlight is how our bodies primarily make vitamin D. And it's pretty common to see folks struggling with anxiety and depression feel noticeably better when they correct a vitamin D deficiency.
Huh.
And get this comparison. Paleolithic humans, our ancestors, probably got around 4,000 units of vitamin D daily. The average modern person, maybe closer to 200.
Wow, 4,000 versus 200. That's a massive difference. No wonder it could impact mood.
Yeah, it really puts it in perspective.
Okay. Moving on to solution 3, prioritizing sleep quality. So it's not just about the hours logged.
Exactly. Getting enough hours is great, obviously. But improving the quality of the sleep you get, that can lead to real symptom improvements, even if the duration isn't perfect. Maybe 5 hours of really deep, restful sleep could be better than 8 hours of tossing and turning.
That's actually really encouraging, especially with busy lives.
Right. It's about making the sleep you do get count.
Okay, number 4 involves
Yeah.
creating our brain, specifically tackling rumination. I think a lot of people can relate to that, getting stuck in those negative thought loops.
Oh, absolutely. Rumination, just getting stuck, going over and over negative stuff in your head. It's a huge driver for both depression and anxiety. To kind of understand how to deal with it, it helps to think about how our brain even creates our reality.
Okay.
Like all our senses, sight, sound, touch, they're just sending electrical signals to the brain. And the brain takes these signals and, well, interprets them to build the world we experience. It's almost like a simulation it's constantly running.
So what we perceive isn't necessarily objective reality.
Pretty much. The raw input is neutral, basically. It's our brain that slaps a label on it. Good, bad, threatening, safe. And here's a crucial thing. Our brain makes this fundamental, often unconscious choice. Is the universe basically hostile or is it friendly? And honestly, there's no empirical proof either way.
Huh. Never thought of it like that.
Yeah.
And that interpretation actually shapes our brain over time.
Exactly. The more you interpret things negatively, the stronger those neural pathways become. It's like,
Yeah.
well, someone who's been depressed for 20 years has become, in a way, very skilled at being depressed. Their brain is efficient at it.
Wow. Skilled at being depressed. That's quite a thought.
Yeah. So stopping rumination, it's about changing the focus, consciously shifting your attention away from those loops.
Sounds like it takes practice.
It absolutely does. The idea is simple, but doing it. That often involves specific techniques to learn how to redirect that focus. Our sources mention these exist, definitely something worth exploring more.
Okay. Let's move to number 5, which our source highlighted is potentially the most significant factor: social interaction and connection, which feels kind of paradoxical in our hyper-connected world, but the evidence seems strong.
It's so striking, isn't it? Humans evolved over hundreds of thousands of years as intensely social communal beings. We needed the tribe to survive.
Right.
our modern lives, they often just don't provide that same level of deep, consistent connection, even with all the tech.
And there are actual physiological reasons why feeling isolated can ramp up anxiety and depression.
Oh, absolutely. Think back ancestrally. Being kicked out of the group, being isolated, that often meant death. You couldn't hunt alone, defend yourself alone, find resources alone. That deep-seated fear of isolation, that need for connection, it's still wired into us.
Wow.
And the research now is really backing this up powerfully. There is a Norwegian study, for example, that found group activities fostering connection and belonging. Well, they were twice as effective as traditional antidepressants for depression.
Wait, twice as effective? Seriously?
Twice as
Yeah.
effective, yeah. It's remarkable.
So what kind of activities are we talking about? Anything specific?
Honestly, it can be simple stuff. Things that just get you interacting with others around a shared interest or purpose, like gardening clubs, photography groups, book clubs.
Hmm.
Even just making a real effort to have regular, meaningful meetups with friends. Anything that fosters that sense of connection, of belonging, of being seen.
Yeah, you can really feel the difference when you have that.
Yeah.
It's like we're trying to reclaim this fundamental human need that's kind of gotten lost in the shuffle of modern life, you know?
Makes total sense. Okay, finally, the sources gave us a bonus insight. The role of inflammation. This seems to be cropping up more and more in discussions about mental health.
It really is. Inflammation looks like another critical piece of this puzzle. It affects mental symptoms, sure, but also loads of other health conditions. There's actually pretty compelling evidence, like from animal studies,
Yeah.
where they inject rats with pro-inflammatory stuff, and the rats start showing behaviors that look a whole lot like depression in humans.
So inflammation in the body can directly mess with your head.
That's the growing understanding, yeah. They even have a term for it now, lipopolysaccharide-induced depression. Basically, inflammation triggers causing depressive symptoms.
The logic is pretty straightforward, right? If your body's generally inflamed, you're likely going to feel worse overall, mentally included.
Okay, so the logical next step is try to reduce inflammation. Exactly. Makes sense, doesn't it? So things like changing your diet to cut down on inflammatory foods, maybe trying stuff like cold exposure, which, like we mentioned, ties back to Wim Hof
Right,
and
yeah.
other anti-inflammatory strategies. The idea is lower your overall inflammation levels, and you'll likely see an improvement in depression and anxiety symptoms.
And the research supports this link specifically.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Consistently, higher levels of inflammatory markers in the blood are linked with a greater risk of developing both depression and anxiety. In fact, one statistic was that the average person with depression has about 50% higher levels of these pro-inflammatory markers compared to someone who isn't depressed.
50% higher, wow.
Yeah. And what's really interesting to loop back, often when they measure serotonin and dopamine in depressed individuals, the levels are, well, normal.
Normal levels.
Often, yeah. Which kind of tells you the story is likely way more complicated than just a simple neurotransmitter shortage. Inflammation seems to be a really big player.
This has been incredibly illuminating. Seriously, it feels like there are so many different threads, but they all connect, you know? Accessible things that play a role in how we feel.
Absolutely. And the hope is really that by understanding some of these mechanisms, the raw materials, the gut, stress, inflammation, connection, and how interconnected it all is, well, hopefully you, the listener, feel a bit more empowered. That there are these readily available strategies you can explore, taking a more maybe holistic view of your own well-being.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? This world that gives us all this amazing technology to connect instantly. Maybe the most vital connections, the ones we really need for well-being, are still rooted in our ancient biology. You know, actual face-to-face interaction, being part of a group, having a body that's not constantly fighting inflammation. It poses a big question, I guess. Can true connection, the kind that wards off that deep loneliness, really be replicated through screens alone? Or do we fundamentally need something more tangible, more human?